it's amazing. I don't know, but I'm busy. I think it's really been kind of an interesting thing, hasn't it? I mean, your world, everybody's world just kind of shuts down to a great extent anyway, and sometimes entirely. And I don't know, I think you learn a lot about yourself and you get a gain of perspective on life in the world. I don't mean to get, philosophical or anything, but I think, and notwithstanding the tragedy of it all, it's been probably there have been some positives to this, don't you think?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I think obviously everyone spending time with family and, just to me that you really find out what's important to you, to kind of piggyback what you said, you find out what's important to you as a person because that's what you find yourself doing in your downtime, and I think that's, it's important to gain a little perspective, and I think that's at the very least something we've all gained through all of this. And not having sports is something that I'll never take for granted again. To watch a Mariners versus Angels game, or watch the Mets play the Phillies is not something that I ever thought I'd miss. But yet here I am, and not having golf. And I guess just what's it been like for you to not have the NCAA tournament and not have sports as we know it?
Well, I mean, it was like hitting a brick wall at 100 miles an hour. The pace of the basketball broadcast season, comes to a screeching halt as it inevitably always does. But the way that it came to a halt for us, and then on top of that, so you're kind of prepared for, my routine as things change dramatically once that's done, but then they had to have everything else shut down at the same time. It's been, just a mega dose of it. And, I've heard people that are retired talk about how, they can't believe how busy they are. They're busier than they were when they were working. And I kind of get it now, because we all will keep our minds going 1,000 miles an hour upon awakening until we go to bed. And, so you fill it with something, your head, and you find things to do. I just think it's kind of harkens back to maybe what it was like 100 years ago. You slow down, and we've talked it through here, but I'm not so sure people will not have benefited greatly from this if once it's all said and done.
Yeah. I wasn't going to go here, but you kind of mentioned it, the end of the basketball season. I don't think we've talked to you since then. What was that day like in Indianapolis? Calling a game, but then more so the circus afterwards, being quarantined and not knowing if you guys were going to fly home and who you could be around and finding out about Coach Hoiberg. What do you remember about that night?
Oh, man, it was unbelievable. I mean, there was buzz about the virus even before the tournament, but that morning at breakfast, I can't remember the specifics, but there were some things that were happening, and some of us were saying, "Gee, I wonder if the tournaments will get through the tournaments and whatnot." But then, about 2 p.m, I'm in Coach Hoiberg's suite recording our pregame show, and he said, "Man, I don't feel good. I didn't sleep last night." He says, "I don't think it's the virus thing." He said, "I think I've got the flu or something." And so 2 hours later, we're at the pregame meal, and he's sitting there at the table with a thermometer in his mouth. RJ brought a thermometer, and so then the game starts, and we get the tweets about the NBA issues that unfolded that night, and I mean, it was surreal even then. And then, not to mention when Seamus McKnight escorted Coach out the tunnel, that's when, and because, we knew that the virus was getting around even more over the last 6 hours nationwide in the NBA and whatnot. It was funny. Jake and I were talking, after the game, they had the team sequestered, isolated in the locker room. And I said to him, if they're really thinking about this, they ought to have us in there too. We've been around them just as much as anybody else, but they didn't think about us. So we walked back to the hotel, and we were going to meet downstairs and go get something to eat. I went down to the lobby, and the front desk manager says, "What do you need?" I said, what do I need? I said, nothing. I'm meeting a guy down here. He said, and all of a sudden 8 cops come walking toward me. You need to go to your room. I said, what's going on? And you need to go to your room. So I went to my room and called Jake. I said, I'll come down to your room. And I tried to do that, and the elevators were locked. I mean, it was like, and it just blew up that night over those 4 hours after the game, as far as nobody knowing what was going on and the fear factor. So you come home after that the next day, and here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are a month later.
It seems like a year later, doesn't it? I mean, that seems like so long ago that was the case, because the next day we were supposed to jump in a car and head to Wichita for baseball, and we made it to York before we turned around. That's when all the news started coming out that everything was canceled, and then conferences were suspending all spring sports. It was literally every time you refreshed your Twitter feed, there was another conference banging something. And we had no idea what was really going on. So it was a period of 48 hours that I'll never forget. And I can only imagine. One night you're watching Noah Vedral and Brant Banks run a pick and roll, and then the next night, the next night there's no NCAA tournament. It's just it was a crazy time for sure. And the parts are still moving for Husker hoops, as we've got some more departures to talk about with Cam and Deshaun, but still a lot of momentum as you pick up the Pitt transfer in McGowan's, and I continue to be amazed with the job that Coach Abdelmassih, KP, has done of keeping the revolving door as opposed to it being a one-way door out. It's a revolving door with players coming in. I guess, what's your perspective on the shape of the roster in the last 10 days?
Well, people are going to hear the same thing out of me every year, but I mean, I really mean it. I think they're really, really talented, and so much so that if waivers go through and guys get eligible and don't have to sit, it's probably too deep in terms of keeping everybody happy, but that's a good problem. And I don't think this is just a Nebraska thing. I mean, if you're paying attention, this transfer portal thing has just become insane the last this off season. It's it started last year. I thought it was pretty interesting, but I look at it and I really, really like it. And we don't know 2 or 3 guys whether they're going to be eligible to play this winter, but even without their eligibility, I think this team is going to be able to compete. And it's not going to be one of those deals where you got to just play perfectly to have a chance. I mean, I think there'll be a larger margin of error because of the talent level.
Yeah, and it's certainly going to be interesting to see. Again, if you want, I can come over and shred your scorecards for you, because you're going to have to start over again next year too. I suppose that this it's going to be another new batch on the floor. The good news is some of these guys have at least spent a year together, maybe not on the floor necessarily, but just around each other. So personally, it should go a little smoother than it did this year, but it's still going to be a new batch of players nonetheless. Now that you kind of had some time to reflect on the year, spending a year with Coach Hoiberg, and being around these coaches, being around what style he wants to play, the recruiting efforts from Coach Abdelmassih, and obviously being around Doc and Bobby Lutz, and being around these guys, what do you take away from year one, Kent, that's going to make it easier for you to get up after 2-3 conference wins next year to come back and call games again?
Well, I don't know that I have anything new to say about that. I mean, over the year, just our perception before things started about the staff being real solid has just been, it's been embellished. These guys the collection of coaches on the staff is really something. And Coach Hoiberg's style. I think you've heard other conference coaches talk about how, to a man, they're all saying that it's gonna happen in Lincoln, and I think I don't know. It just occurred to me, back in the day when when Coach Osborne was coaching football, one of the things that people would talk about is how hard it is to prepare for Nebraska football because they were so unique. And I think that, the pace and space kind of offense, everybody is interchangeable at every position, save for maybe a guy with his back to the basket occasionally inside. I think that is so different than, conventional college basketball. And so, it's kind of they're kind of on the cutting edge and they're unique. And and you can see him recruiting to that. Speaking of, talking about the transfers and whatnot. But just the overall thing is I think they're going to be way more talented this year. I really do, than they were last year. Notwithstanding, a couple guys leaving.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. It's just going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. And again, getting used to a whole bunch of new players. That will certainly be interesting, talking with Kent Pavelka, voice of Husker Hoops here on Sports Nightly. Speaking of new players, Kent, we're featuring a new, I don't even know what this is called, event, this social media entertainment, I suppose is the best way to put it. First National Bank is a great partner of ours here at the Husker Sports Network, has promoted a piece to where people who are doing everything they can to stay sane, especially with young kids around the house, encouraging people to get out and video themselves shooting some hoops in the driveway with their own chance with some personal commentary from one Kent Pavelka. So, number one, your skills will be sharpened, and number two, you get to watch some potential future Huskers out here sending some videos into you. How excited are you about this?
Well, Michael Zorb from the network got a hold of me and said, "You want to do this?" I said, "Sure." So they, if you go to Twitter, you want to check out one of them. You can check my Twitter handle out at Kent Pavelka. You just submit a, if you get out in the driveway and do something that would be worthy of some play-by-play or not, and we'll do some. So I did lend my voice to what I'm seeing on the screen, and I think we have one of them up already. Another one's coming up tonight. But people are entering. You just put it on, just tweet it out, and then we'll put. If we choose your video, we'll produce it and put it on. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it should be fun. At Kent Pavelka, at Husker Sports, at Husker Hoops. Go follow those accounts, and you can see all this. I'm just wondering what Jake and I have to do to get you to call a game of horse between the three of us.
Well, what I was thinking, Ben, is some of the stuff that we videoed before broadcasts over the last couple of years.
I don't know that we want to put that stuff out for the public to see. Do you?
I'd like to call my own behind the back layup shot, but
the one that you missed 47 times, is that the one you kept trying in the horse game with Jake, and he just buried you?
Point is, as though the only one I saved was the one that went in. So.
Oh, yeah, that's the one, huh? You probably had to delete a bunch of stuff on your phone to make sure you had room for all the video footage to make sure you got one on there.
That's true. It's true. But it's kind of fun. Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, it should be fun. Again, at Husker Hoops, at Husker Sports, and, of course, at Kent Pavelka to go check those out. Brought to you by First National Bank. Should pretty cool to pass the time, and, of course, to match up with a Husker legend would be good. KP, called you a Husker legend. It's the best compliment I've ever given you. We appreciate you spending part of your quarantine time with us and catching us up on the life of KP. We appreciate it.
Was I supposed to wear a mask during this? I forget.
I think if you're practicing social distancing and you're at home and your wife Lou can handle it, I think. And Lucky, if all these people that you're around and dogs every day, I think you're safe. I don't think a mask is required.
All right. I'll carry on then. I'll put it on after we're done here.